For over 200 years, humans had been the quiet force that held the galaxy together. Where others shouted, they listened. Where ancient rivalries refused to die, humans stepped in and somehow made enemies speak across the table instead of through the barrel of a weapon. In the Galactic Compact, they were known as Peacekeepers, always calm, always reasonable, always stepping into the fire without raising their voice. So, when the Warlock Confederacy started making bold moves, near the border worlds, pushing into neutral territories, intimidating smaller civilizations, and offering protection in a way that sounded too much like a threat, the Compact did what it always did. It sent humans to talk. The choice made perfect sense. After all, the Warlock were proud and aggressive, but even they had paused. In the past, when faced with a calm human envoy and a treaty scroll in hand, Ambassador Cale Thorne was chosen for the mission. He was not a soldier. He didn't arrive on Elira Prime with a fleet or a show of power. His ship was sleek, quiet, and purely diplomatic. The crew was small, dressed in gray uniforms without insignias or weapons. They stepped onto the surface of the contested world with open hands and soft expressions, as if unaware that they had just entered a place that could become a battlefield. Elira Prime was already tense. Its skies buzzed with the low hum of Warlock scout ships, and its cities, though peaceful in appearance, held their breath with every new transmission from orbit. The Warlocks said they were there to help stabilize the region. Most knew that was only half true. Cale Thorne began his meetings immediately, sitting across from Warlock commanders who towered over him both in size and tone. They raised their voices. He did not. They made demands. He countered with questions. They talked of military superiority. He talked of peace, of shared prosperity, of the Compact's unity. To those watching from afar, through news feeds and intercepted broadcasts, it looked like another calm human doing what they always did, trying to save everyone. Some admired it. Some pitied it. Others, especially the younger races, saw it as outdated. Why speak when the enemy only respects strength? But Cale didn't argue. He didn't push. He simply recorded everything. He spoke kindly. He never reacted, not even when insulted or interrupted. And yet something strange began to form in the air around him. A sense that he wasn't just negotiating. He was listening too closely. He was studying too quietly. He was watching in a way that didn't match the relaxed smile on his face. The Warlock noticed it but couldn't name it. Other diplomats on the planet began to feel it too, that the humans were waiting for something. No one knew what. But every day that passed without a single hostile word from Cale Thorne only deepened the tension. He was too calm, too polite, and in a galaxy used to shouting, silence started to feel dangerous. Every morning on Elira Prime, Cale Thorne walked into the Warlock Command Center with the same quiet expression and calm posture, as if he had all the time in the galaxy. The Warlock leaders, tall and proud with sharp uniforms and louder voices, didn't hide their frustration. They insulted him openly, mocked human diplomacy, and sometimes even laughed in the middle of talks. Cale never raised his voice, never interrupted. He listened carefully, nodded slowly, and always responded in a tone so even that it made the others around him more uncomfortable than if he had shouted back. Around the system, human ships stayed at the edge of the stars, not armed, for battle, not in defensive formations, just waiting, silent. That silence started conversations across other member worlds. In space stations, on distant colonies, in the chambers of rival species, whispers began to grow. Were the humans really brave, or were they just too scared to act? Was peace their true strength, or had they forgotten how to protect themselves? The Warlocks certainly thought they knew the answer. They increased their patrols, sent more ships into orbit, and made their presence on Elira louder and more aggressive. Then one day a terrible mistake happened. An Eliran envoy on their way to a neutral meeting point was struck and killed in a skirmish with Warlock patrols. The Warlock claimed it was an accident, a misunderstanding. The Eliran people mourned, and fear spread like dust in the wind. Cameras turned toward the human delegation. Everyone expected a reaction, anger, warning, maybe even withdrawal. But Cale didn't leave. He didn't even raise the tone of his voice. Instead, he walked with Illyrian elders during the funeral, holding the flag of their fallen envoy with quiet respect. Afterward, his team helped rebuild the damaged site with their own hands. No media coverage, no public speech, just silent aid, as if nothing had changed. This confused many and frustrated others. A few species began to see the humans as weak, too gentle for a galaxy ruled by pressure. But not all felt that way. Some noticed Kale's eyes when he stood in the background, calm but unblinking, always watching, always listening. He never argued with the Warlock. He never interrupted their bragging or corrected their twisted truths. But he recorded everything, word by word, movement by movement, and the data was being sent somewhere. No one knew where. One evening, as the sun dipped below the glass towers of Illyria Prime, Kale stood alone on a balcony facing the Warlock's newest cruiser parked in low orbit. He stared at it for a long time, then turned and walked back inside with the same gentle pace as always. Those around him began to feel something strange. Not fear, not exactly, but a slow, quiet tension that spread like cold mist. The Warlock continued their show of power, but some of their younger officers began to glance at Kale with unease. His refusal to react didn't make him look weak anymore. It made him look prepared. The silence had changed. It no longer felt peaceful. It felt like something hidden was waiting behind it. And Kale Thorne, always so calm, always so polite, seemed like the only one who knew what it was. It happened during a quiet night cycle when most of Illyria Prime slept beneath its pale twin moons. But the silence didn't last long. The Warlock, High Command sent a wide transmission across the system, declaring that they would now take full protective control of Illyria to maintain peace and security. They didn't use the word occupation, but everyone knew what it meant. They had moved from threats to action. Within minutes, the news reached the Galactic Compact's Council, and panic spread like sparks in dry grass. Emergency sessions began, voices rose, and diplomats scrambled to issue statements, but nothing seemed enough. All eyes turned to the humans, the so-called Peacekeepers, hoping for a calming word or a compromise to cool the Warlock fire. But this time, the human delegation did not send a plea or a proposal. They sent only one message, short, simple, and broadcasted to every major outpost, ship, and capital. You've crossed the line. We are invoking Protocol Zero. The words were unfamiliar to most. Across the compact, leaders exchanged confused glances, unsure whether it was a bluff, a tactic, or just another diplomatic phrase. But those with long memories, the old archivists, the silent observers, the forgotten strategists, froze when they heard it. Protocol Zero was a code buried deep in old human treaties, never explained, never used. It was not listed among known policies or procedures. It had no official activation guidelines. That was the first clue. The second came shortly after, not with noise or light, but with movement in the darkest corners of space. In distant systems far from the spotlight, ancient human listening stations flickered to life. Vaults in cold moons opened silently. Civilian research ships, those that had orbited peacefully for decades, suddenly changed course with synchronized precision. And then, across human-controlled space, fleets began to stir. Not in anger, but in silence. These were not ships known to the public. Their designs were unfamiliar, their codes decades old, and yet they moved with purpose, guided by instructions that had clearly been waiting a very long time. Hidden archives unlocked, releasing files not seen since the founding of the Compact. Quiet names resurfaced, names of ships, of operations, of protocols, each tied to events long buried under treaties and peace talks. For generations, humanity had listened, helped, and solved problems. But they had also remembered, not with bitterness, not for revenge, but for accounting. Every insult logged, every betrayal categorized, every civilian loss documented, every broken agreement marked in detail. While others forgot, the humans had quietly built a ledger, not to act in the heat of the moment, but to prepare for the moment when peace was no longer respected. The Warlock didn't seem to care. They tightened their grip around Elira's orbit, moving more cruisers into place, acting as if the humans' message was just noise. But others were beginning to feel the change. On the Compact's secure networks, messages flowed faster, marked with growing urgency. Civilizations that once saw humans as overly gentle now began to feel uneasy. Something had shifted. The human smile, always calm, no longer seemed soft. It seemed deliberate, like the quiet pause before a storm no one had believed would come. Cale Thorne, still on Elira Prime, stood quietly as Warlock officers moved through the city like they already owned it. His voice remained even, his actions patient. But around him, human staff moved with new rhythm, not rushed, not panicked, but measured. They began clearing out buildings quietly, rechecking communication lines, and updating sealed logs, and though they never raised their tone, they no longer tried to negotiate. Because negotiation, it seemed, had ended the moment Protocol Zero was spoken. Now the galaxy was left wondering something that had never occurred to them before. What if the humans had never truly been avoiding conflict? What if their patience was not the absence of strength but the waiting of it? And for the first time, those who once saw humans as peaceful began to question if that peace had only been a mask, one worn not to hide weakness, but to give everyone else a chance to choose better. Because now that the humans had turned the page, it was clear the book they were writing had already been prepared, signed, and sealed. All they had done was wait. The Warlock Armada, with all its proud might, arrived in full formation above Elira Prime, casting heavy shadows over the blue-green world below. Their ships, sharp-edged and loud in design, circled the planet like wolves around a quiet campfire. From the surface, people could see their outlines pass across the sky, and from orbit, the Warlock commanders watched with smug satisfaction. Protocol Zero had been declared, yes, but they believed it to be nothing more than a dramatic phrase, a desperate warning from a race that had always chosen words over weapons. They laughed, sent mocking messages to the Compact, and doubled their numbers near Elira's orbit. But then, without warning, something shifted in the void. Out of hyperspace came ships no one had seen before, not silver, not smooth like human diplomatic vessels, but black, silent, and shaped like they had been carved from night itself. They made no sound, gave no signal of intent, and yet they moved with perfect coordination. Their surfaces bore no flags, no names, no light, only silence. These were not ships built for travel. They were built for presence. Their guidance systems didn't have pilots, they had minds. Artificial intelligence so advanced that it made other species uncomfortable. The ships did not open fire. They didn't even lock weapons. Instead, they transmitted a file, not to the Warlock, not to Elira, but to every major council, capital, embassy, and media channel in the Galactic Compact. The file was large and old, 5 centuries of records, carefully stored, and fully verified. It was a detailed, time-stamped history of every major act the Warlock Confederacy had committed. Invasions hidden behind peacekeeping, forced relocations, political betrayals, and cultural destruction. It included images, logs, eyewitness statements from survivors, and even secret communications intercepted over decades. Every lie the Warlock had told was exposed. Every excuse they had given was disproven. The document was not a weapon, but it hit the galaxy with the force of one. Shock swept through compact space as governments, scholars, and media scrambled to verify what they were seeing. And it was all real. Every page, every detail, every scar left behind. It had been collected, patiently, with care, by humans who had never once stopped watching, but that wasn't the end. At the exact moment the file went live, something began to happen across Warlock space. Lights on their orbital platforms flickered, then died. Civilian and military satellites stopped responding. At first it seemed like a communications glitch, but then it spread. Slow, quiet, exact. Their navigation systems faltered. Entire control hubs went dark. Planetary defense networks fell silent, not destroyed, just shut off. Their command AI cores, the pride of Warlock engineering, no longer obeyed. They had not been hacked in brute force. They had been studied, decoded, and overwritten using access points planted years before, hidden in systems the Warlock had never thought to check. And now those seeds had bloomed. Across the galaxy, other species watched not a battle, but a display, a message written in silence. The Warlock, who believed strength came from fear, were shown something else, the weight of knowledge and the power of preparation. The Compact Council, seated in a chamber once filled with debates over treaties and balance, sat quietly, watching the data roll across their screens. There was no need for weapons. The Warlock had been held in place, not by lasers, but by truth. Their systems were frozen, their lies exposed, and their pride shaken by an enemy that never raised its voice. Humanity had not come to fight. They had come to conclude. Their ships remained still, cold in the silence of space, but behind every quiet moment was the message that echoed louder than any weapon. They had always been ready. They simply chose not to act, until now. And in that silence, filled with unspoken intent, the galaxy began to understand. The humans had not struck out of rage. They had struck with something far deeper, far older, and far more patient. Certainty. The Warlock Confederacy, once feared across sectors and known for its proud dominance, collapsed not with an explosion but with a quiet silence that spread like frost. In just a few days they surrendered, not because of any invasion or attack, but because their systems failed around them, their control shattered by precision rather than power. Entire fleets stood still, disconnected from command. Planetary leaders received no orders, and their strongest bases couldn't even open their hangar doors. There was no battle to fight, because the war had never started. The galaxy watched in disbelief as a civilization that once roared across star maps was reduced to silence by a force that never fired a weapon. In response, humanity did not claim new worlds, raise flags, or install governors. They offered no list of demands, no punishment or condition. All they sent was a message, short and strange, but unforgettable. We are not warriors. We are librarians who got tired of adding pages to the same book of cruelty. We filed a report, you failed. The statement confused some at first, but as the meaning sank in, silence followed. It became clear that humanity had not acted in anger. They had acted out of principle. For centuries they had witnessed conflict after conflict, hoping their efforts to bring peace would be enough. They never stopped believing in dialogue. They never gave up on cooperation, but while they smiled and sat at negotiation tables, they were also taking notes. Quietly, carefully, with a patience no other species truly understood, until now. Their kindness had always seemed endless, their voices soft and welcoming, their presence comforting. But now those same traits felt different. The softness was no longer seen as weakness, but as a shield. A mask worn not to hide fear, but to give others the chance to choose better paths. The Warlock had not taken that chance, and so the mask was lifted. The galaxy, once familiar with human compassion, now saw something new behind those same calm faces: calculation, clarity, and most of all, control. And when the dust settled, humanity simply stepped back. Their black ships returned to deep space. Their diplomats resumed quiet roles in old embassies, and Cale Thorne, who had never once raised his voice, left Elira Prime with the same calm walk he had arrived with. But no one looked at him the same way. No one looked at any human the same way. On every world, from icy colonies to desert trade ports, the memory of what had happened, of what hadn't happened, lingered like a shadow. Those who once scoffed at human patience now studied it with caution. The races who once pushed against their boundaries now treated them with distance. And the Compact, long used to calling on humans as peacemakers, chose its words more carefully. Because it was now clear that peace had never been humanity's nature. It had been their restraint. And restraint, the galaxy learned, was a choice. one that could be removed without warning, without anger, and without error. From that day forward, no one dared to mistake patience for passivity, and no one, not even the boldest warlords, ever again asked humans to settle disputes with kind words alone. The librarians had closed their books, and for once, the galaxy fell quiet, not in fear of human violence, but in deep respect for their silence.